Hello, Dr. Childress here. So we're talking about the splitting pathology within the family that's being evidenced most prominently by the child. An intense demonization of the targeted parent, a rigidity, locked in thinking about the ability to change, and then we will see the echoes of the idealization of the allied parent as the manifestation of the splitting, but most characteristic will be the demonization aspect of the splitting pathology towards the targeted parent. Now, in this video segment, I want to extend it just a little bit to understand the splitting pathology of the allied narcissistic borderline parent, spouse, relative to the other spouse. So, a divorce is a breach in the attachment bond, between the spousal attachment bond, and that's going to be provoking the narcissistic and borderline pathology of the other spouse, having to do with rejection and abandonment in the spousal relationship. And so as long as the other parent, that other spouse, the targeted parent, was part of the marriage, they were a spouse, they were part of the bonding system. They are my husband or they are my wife. Now, I can have a lot of fights with my husband and wife, but they are still my husband and wife. They're still within that bonding system. The moment that divorce occurs, it shifts. And so, yeah, remember, we don't have shades of gray. So the moment you're no longer my husband or my wife, boom, it shifts over to the rejection system, the avoidance system. So now we have an intense demonization of the other spouse. They're awful, they're horrible, and all the good stuff I used to remember. No, they're evil, they're abusive on that demonization side. But even more importantly is role relationships, which is over here you are my husband or you are my wife. Once we switch to the rejection system, you become my ex-husband and you become my ex-wife. And that's rigidly locked in, and that's the way it is. Now, for the child, though, the child still maintains a bonded relationship with the targeted parent. And so the child still has a loving bond. And so that's not an ex-mother or an ex-father, that's my current mother and current father. So that, for the child, that bonding system still defines that parent-child relationship. But that's incompatible with the spousal organization of the narcissistic borderline parent. They cannot perceptually register that the child loves the parent. Because for the narcissist to register that the child loves the parent would mean that the love and bonding system would have to be on, so that the parent could see the child's love and bonding. But this parent, the love and bonding system is turned off. It's entirely inhibited. So that love and bonding system isn't on. The only one that's on is the rejection system. So this parent cannot perceptually register that the child still has a bonded relationship with that parent. From this parent's perspective, that is an ex-husband, that is an ex-wife, they must become an ex-mother or an ex-father to maintain the consistency of the splitting pathology that is being imposed neurologically by only having one system open. So it's a neurologically imposed imperative that this parent must become an ex-husband, an ex-mother, or an ex-father, because they are an ex-husband and an ex-wife, and that is imposed by the nature of the splitting pathology. And so it's a very characteristic symptom you will see with this type of pathology, that the ex-husband must become an ex-father as well, and the ex-wife must become an ex-mother. And where you will see this pathology, you won't see it necessarily as you first approach it, because they'll be saying, oh, yes, I want the child to have a relationship with their other parent, and I'm really trying. I tell the child to have a relationship with the other parent. So you will see that mask or that cover over it. Where you will begin to expose it is as you start to move towards restoring the child's relationship with the targeted parent. As this starts to move into that, you're going to see the rigidity of the splitting dynamic start to come down and lock up the therapy. And the way you will see it typically, and in a treatment-focused assessment protocol, where I will typically see that is in the second session with the allied narcissistic borderline parents. So the first session with them, I get some download data and I get information from them. The second session is once I get the overall pathology, second session, I present them with what my findings are. This is what I found. And you will see that rigidity and that splitting, that the ex-husband must become an ex-father, the ex-wife must become an ex-mother, and you will begin to see it become almost an obsessive focus. You'll see obsessive qualities to the need to have that parent become a rejected mother or a rejected father in addition to rejected spouse. In the obsessive quality becomes quite distinct, and you'll see an elevated anxiety, particularly around the borderlines. The borderlines will particularly show that elevated anxiety, and they begin to psychologically decompensate. And so it's not unusual in that second session of the treatment-focused assessment protocol, as the potential of the child actually having a bonded relationship with the targeted parent becomes a reality for the allied narcissistic borderline parent. You'll see conceptually they will start to disorganize, and you'll start to get flamboyant, persecutory delusions, ideas that the child, there's some sort of threat out there that they need to be protected from, or that they will try to convince you ever more forcefully about how bad that other parent is, how bad the other parent, no, they're really, really bad. And they'll keep forcing that theme down there, that the other parent is really, really bad. And that obsessive quality has to do with the splitting pathology, that locked in. And so if you're threatening to open up their bonding relationship, if you're highlighting the child's love and bonding, and the narcissistic borderline parent is trying to keep that closed, that bonding system closed. No, we need to close that down, we need to close that down. And so you get this obsessive quality. I have seen in that second session with the narcissistic borderline parent, I've seen them collapse into a dissociative denial. And so they'll be going along and they'll be laying things out for them, and you see them start to quiver and get obsessive, and the disorganization and associational thinking will start to come in, and then you'll see their eyes just sort of glass over for a second, and they just go into denial. There's no logical processing of information at that point. So that's the expression of the splitting pathology in the spousal relationship. And the recognition, it's important to recognize that this narcissistic borderline parent cannot perceptually register that the child still has a loving bond to this parent. And you'll also see that in the absence of empathy symptom, that they just don't understand that children love their parents and that parents love their children, and they don't understand that bond, which speaks something about their own childhood history if they don't understand that a child loves a parent. Oh my goodness, what was it like for their childhood? So that's the splitting pathology. It's an incredibly important symptom within the overall constellation of attachment-related pathology surrounding divorce.